Welcome back to Crime Time, Inc.
Always a pleasure.
Today, we're going to be looking at the life of Howard Marks.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's a story you'll find very interesting.
Definitely.
It's not your typical gangster story.
Mm.
He's a guy who went from a small town in Wales to Oxford, studied physics, and then became an international cannabis smuggler.
Right. It's not exactly the usual trajectory.
Not quite.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more fascinating is that he was known as Mr. Nice.
Mr. Nice.
How does a guy who's moving tons of illegal substances around the world earned a nickname like that?
That is the question.
That's the big question.
Right.
The man, the myth, the enigma.
I like it.
Because even after prison, he didn't just disappear.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a best-selling autobiography,
Uh-huh.
became an advocate for cannabis legalization, and even dipped his toes into the entertainment world. It's a pretty wild ride.
It is a life less ordinary. Where do we even begin with someone like Howard Marks?
Well, let's start at the beginning. Howard Marks was born in Kenfig Hill, a small town in Wales.
Okay.
His father was a merchant Navy captain, so often away.
Right.
And his mother was a teacher.
Okay.
Marks went to the same grammar school where his mom taught.
Oh, wow.
Which must have been interesting, to say the least.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But even in those early years, you can see glimpses of the man he would become.
Okay.
Sources describe him as bright, but also a bit of a mischievous character.
Oh, really?
There's a story about him faking undulant fever to get attention.
Oh, my goodness.
Even going so far as to manipulate the thermometer
Wow.
for that added dramatic effect.
So he was already kind of like a showman.
Yeah, a bit of a flair for the theatrical even then.
Yeah. And that mischievous streak seems to have followed him.
Oh, yeah.
He had an Elvis phase, played piano in pubs,
Okay.
but also, importantly, managed to get into Oxford, which isn't exactly a walk in the park.
Not easy at all. That's where things start to get really intriguing.
Okay.
Picture Oxford in the 1960s.
Okay.
A hotbed of intellectual exploration.
Right.
And here's Howard Marks immersed in not just nuclear physics and philosophy, but also the burgeoning world of cannabis.
He even claims to have sold cannabis to Bill Clinton during their time at Oxford.
Okay.
Now, we haven't been able to find any evidence to back that up,
Right.
so take it with a pinch of salt.
Of course. But it does speak volumes about the kind of circles Marks was moving in and his willingness to push boundaries.
Yeah.
He was caught cheating on exams, even experimented with LSD, which he later admitted regretting.
It does make you wonder about that whole Mr. Nice image, right?
Right. But this is what makes Marks so compelling.
Yeah.
He's a man of contrasts. He even claims to have had a brief stint with MI6.
Hold on, MI6. The folks from James Bond.
That's right. The British Secret Service.
Are we saying Mr. Nice was a real-life spy?
That's what he claimed, though. The details are, shall we say, a little hazy.
Okay.
But again, it feeds into this image of Marks as someone who straddles the line between respectability and, well, a life outside the law.
So how does this Oxford-educated, physics-minded guy actually become a full-blown international smuggler?
It's a fascinating transition. In 1970, a university friend of his, Graham Plinston, got arrested for drug trafficking.
Oh.
This connected Marks to Mohammed Durrani,
Okay.
a major player in the Pakistani hashish trade.
So this was his first real link to the source.
It was. But initially, things hit a snag.
Okay.
Durrani didn't deliver the promised supply,
No.
forcing Marks and his associates to scramble for other suppliers.
So even in his early days, he's already navigating the complexities of the international drug trade.
Yeah.
Did he ever consider just giving up and, getting a regular job?
It seems not. He thrived on the challenge. Marks was intelligent, strategic, and had a knack for logistics. Those early operations, while small, were successful and laid the groundwork for his future empire.
So he starts small, but things escalate quickly, right?
Absolutely. By 1972, he was reportedly moving shipments worth tens of thousands of pounds.
Wow.
He even set up a front company selling stamps and dresses for his tracks.
Always thinking ahead.
Always.
But what about the MI6 connection? Did that play a role in his smuggling operation?
Marks claimed that his involvement with MI6 deepened around this time.
Okay.
He suggested he was recruited because of his connections in hashish-producing countries, his undeniable charm, and even his association with the Irish Republican Army, or IRA.
The IRA. That seems like a dangerous connection.
It was. And it seems that these multiple allegiances eventually caught up with him.
Okay.
In 1973, his American smuggling operation, where he was concealing hashish in music equipment for fake British bands,
Wow.
was busted.
Oh.
Marks was arrested by Dutch police that same year, but he skipped bail and became a bit of a media sensation,
Real.
with rumors swirling about IRA abductions. It was all very dramatic.
Like something out of a spy novel.
Exactly.
But eventually he made his way back to England.
He did.
Did that mark the end of his smuggling career?
Not quite. He'd lost most of his fortune.
Okay.
But Marks had a remarkable ability to bounce back. He reconnected with Ernie Combs,
Okay.
a figure from his past who was part of a group called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
Okay.
And through Combs, he met John Dempster.
Okay. The Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of the 1960s counterculture movement.
Right.
What was their connection to all of this?
They were a key part of the global drug trade.
Oh, really?
And Dempster had connections in Nepal,
Okay.
another major source for hashish.
Uh-huh.
They even brought the Yakuza into the picture.
But the Yakuza?
Yes, the Japanese mafia.
How did they get involved?
Through Marx's ever-expanding network. They started using air conditioning equipment shipped to JFK Airport to smuggle hashish into the U.S., where the Gambino crime family would then take possession.
This is incredible. We've gone from fake bands to the Yakuza and the Gambinos.
It's quite a journey.
It's like Marx is weaving this intricate web of international criminal connections.
Exactly. And it was incredibly successful.
Really?
That first deal in 1975, on the 4th of July, no less.
Wow.
Netted Marx a fortune. He was back in the game, bigger and bolder than ever. But as they say, what goes up must come down.
And I'm guessing things are about to get a lot more complicated for Mr. Nice.
They are.
Yeah. So Marx is back on top of the world, raking in millions, rubbing shoulders with some of the most notorious criminal organizations on the planet.
Right.
It's hard to imagine the kind of life he was living.
He was operating on a level that most of us can't even fathom, with multiple aliases, connections that span continents, and enough money to make even the most ambitious person dizzy.
Yeah.
But amidst all the chaos and danger, there was another side to Marx that's often overlooked. He got married to Judy Lane in 1980.
Okay.
And they had 3 children together.
So he's a family man, a husband, a father, at the same time that he's orchestrating these huge international drug deals.
Exactly.
It's another layer to this whole Mr. Nice persona.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. It's like he's compartmentalizing these two very different worlds.
It is a strange juxtaposition. And it's important to remember that even at the height of his smuggling career, Marx primarily dealt in cannabis.
Right.
He seemed to have a moral line he wouldn't cross,
Yeah.
often refusing to get involved with harder drugs.
He even claimed to have turned down an opportunity to smuggle cocaine.
Really?
Believing it to be too dangerous.
Was this genuine concern for the well-being of others, or was it just a calculated business decision?
Right.
I mean, he was still profiting from an illegal trade, even if it was just cannabis.
That's a good question. And it gets to the heart of who Howard Marks really was.
Okay.
He genuinely believed that cannabis was less harmful than other drugs,
Mm-hmm.
almost viewing it as a victimless crime. This was partly influenced by his time at Oxford, where he'd studied philosophy and explored different ethical frameworks. He saw himself as challenging the hypocrisy of a system that demonized cannabis while turning a blind eye to other, more harmful substances.
So he's not just a thrill-seeking smuggler.
No.
It's a philosophical underpinning to his actions.
There is. But it's still a risky business, right? I mean, sooner or later, law enforcement is going to catch up with you.
They did eventually. In 1978, one of Marx's aliases was compromised, forcing him to adopt a new identity.
Right.
He purchased a passport from a convicted murderer named Donald Nice.
Donald Nice!
And that's where the Mr. Nice moniker was born, almost by accident.
It's ironic, isn't it? This notorious criminal adopts the name Nice, and it sticks. It almost becomes a brand, a persona he can hide behind.
But did this new identity help him evade the authorities for long?
It did for a while. Marx claimed to have successfully smuggled 25 tons of cannabis through JFK Airport alone between 1975 and 1978.
That's incredible.
His network was vast, connecting him to the mafia, the Yakuza, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, even the Thai Army and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO.
The PLO. He was really connecting the dots.
I know, it's amazing.
Between some of the most powerful and dangerous groups in the world. It's mind-blowing.
He was a master at exploiting gaps in the system, finding ways to move his product across borders with incredible efficiency.
Okay.
But this was the late 70s, early 80s,
Right.
and law enforcement agencies were starting to get wise to his operation.
Uh-huh.
The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, launched Operation Eclectic,
Operation
a
Eclectic.
massive multinational effort aimed at bringing him down.
Can you tell us a bit more about what that entailed? What kind of tactics were they using to track him down?
It was a long and complex operation involving years of surveillance, phone tapping,
Right.
and the cultivation of informants.
Mm.
They were building a case against Marks brick by brick.
So they were playing the long game, really putting the pressure on.
Did Marks ever suspect he was being watched?
He must have known he was a target.
Yeah.
The DEA had already busted a major cannabis shipment linked to him in 1980,
Okay.
leading to his arrest.
Right.
But in a twist that almost defies belief, Marks managed to escape serious charges.
How did he pull that off? This is the DEA we're talking about, not some small-town police department.
He came up with an elaborate story,
Okay.
claiming that he was actually working for MI6.
Hold on. He's claiming to be a double agent.
He is posing as a smuggler to infiltrate the IRA.
Did anyone actually believe that?
Incredibly, the jury bought it.
Really?
He was acquitted of drug smuggling.
But convicted of using false passports, for which he served a mere 5 days in prison.
5 days.
5 days.
For smuggling tons of cannabis. That's unbelievable.
I know.
Did the DEA just give up after that?
They weren't fooled. They knew Marks was a major player,
Yeah.
and Operation Eclectic continued,
Right.
but they needed more concrete evidence,
Okay.
a way to break into his inner circle,
Yeah.
and that's where things take a darker turn.
Okay, I'm sensing a betrayal coming.
You are.
Who was it?
Remember Tony Moynihan,
Huh.
the lord who owned those massage parlors in the Philippines?
Right.
Well, he found himself in legal trouble, and the
Okay.
DEA saw an opportunity.
Uh-huh.
They offered him a deal. Help us take down Howard Marks,
Yeah.
and we'll make your problems go away.
So they turned one of Mark's associates against him. Classic tactic.
It is.
Did Moynihan agree?
He did. He became their inside man,
Okay.
recording conversations with Marks,
Wow.
providing the DEA with crucial evidence of his operations.
That's rough.
It was a devastating betrayal, a blow that Marks' organization never fully recovered from.
And this is where it all starts to unravel for Mr. Nice.
It is. The DEA, working with Spanish police, finally caught up with Marks in 1988,
Okay.
raiding his home in Mallorca.
Oh, wow.
He and his wife, Judy, were both arrested.
Wait, Judy was arrested too,
She was.
even though she wasn't directly involved in the smuggling.
It was a brutal takedown designed to send a message.
Yeah.
Mark's empire, built over years of careful planning and daring maneuvers, had crumbled.
Mhm.
And this time, there would be no slick courtroom escape.
So Marks is facing extradition serious charges and the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence.
It must have felt like a world away from the life he was used to.
It was a harsh reality check.
Right.
From the luxurious world he had built to the stark confines of prison, Mark's life took a dramatic turn. He was initially held in some of the toughest prisons in Europe, Modelo in Barcelona, then Carabanchel in Madrid, before finally being extradited to the United States and landing in Terre Haute Penitentiary in Indiana. Terre Haute has a reputation for housing some of America's most dangerous criminals. How did Marks cope with this sudden change in circumstances?
You'd think that being thrown into that kind of environment would break someone, but Marks showed remarkable resilience. He refused a plea bargain, spending countless hours poring over evidence with his lawyers, looking for any possible way out. He even came up with a news story claiming his smuggling operations were actually intended for Australia, not the U.S., and that he was set up by the CIA for uncovering their own drug trafficking activities.
It seems like he just couldn't help himself. Even facing serious charges, he was still trying to work the system, spin a tale. Was there any truth to these claims?
It's difficult to say for certain. Marks always had a knack for blurring the lines between fact and fiction. What's undeniable is that he was facing a very real possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars.
And his wife Judy was caught up in this mess too, right? What happened to her?
The DEA offered Marks a deal, plead guilty, and they dropped the charges against Judy.
Right.
He was torn between saving himself and protecting his wife. It's a heartbreaking situation having to make that kind of impossible choice.
Yeah. What did he decide?
In the end, he chose. Marks pleaded guilty to racketeering charges in 1990 and was sentenced to 25 years in Terre Haute. It was a heavy sentence, especially compared to the relatively short stints he'd served before.
25 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Did he serve the whole sentence?
No, Marks adapted to prison life, becoming a model inmate. He taught philosophy and grammar to his fellow prisoners, earning the nickname Narco Polo, a playful nod to his smuggling past. His sentence was reduced for good behavior, and he was released in 1995 after serving 7 years.
So even in prison, the legend of Mr. Nice continued. What did he do after he was released? Did he just fade into obscurity?
Not at all. The world seemed ready to embrace Howard Marks once again. His autobiography, Mr. Nice, became a bestseller, cementing his status as a counterculture icon. His story captured the public imagination, and people were fascinated by this complex character who had navigated both the elite world of Oxford and the shadowy world of international crime.
It's a remarkable story of reinvention. He went from international drug smuggler to best-selling author. Did he stop there?
Marx became a vocal advocate for cannabis legalization, even running for parliament on that platform, though unsuccessfully. He also made appearances in films, performed at music festivals, and even collaborated on songs with bands like the Super Furry Animals.
It's like he was living multiple lives, constantly defying expectations and pushing boundaries.
He had a mischievous twinkle in his eye, a sense of humor that never seemed to fade. It was part of his charm. Even after everything he'd been through, he never seemed to take himself too seriously.
So what can we learn from the life of Howard Marks? What does his story tell us about human nature, about the choices we make?
I think Marx's story challenges us to think beyond easy categories. He was a criminal, yes, but he was also a charmer, a philosopher, a rebel. His life reminds us that people are rarely just one thing, that there are shades of gray contradictions, complexities that make us who we are.
He certainly left his mark on the world.
He did. And perhaps that's why his story continues to resonate even after his death in 2016. It forces us to confront our own assumptions about right and wrong, success and failure. Howard Marks, in all his flawed and charismatic glory, embraced a life outside the lines, and his story encourages us to consider the Mr. Nice that might exist within us all.
I'm sure Simon in particular will have a lot to say about this episode in the weekly review on Sunday. But in the meantime, tune in tomorrow for another great true crime episode.